Okay. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome Stephen. My name is Jakki Jeffs. I'm the Executive Director of Alliance for Life Ontario, and for, I guess, since 1990 I have been an activist against any legalization of assisted suicide or euthanasia in our country. And with me is Stephen Passmore. Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Stephen Passmore, and I got involved in 1993, and since then I have spoken out on behalf of the vulnerable, people with disabilities, the elderly, through my work with Alex Schadenberg and Jakki Jeffs mainly, and I'll continue to do that because most people, the vulnerable, don't have a voice, and so I have felt like, as their older brother, that I have a responsibility to be a voice for the voiceless, and really that's what has motivated me, because most vulnerable people have no say whether they live or die, but I'm going to make sure that they do. How we got there was, and I told you that what they were able to do in Germany was turn everything upside down. The first thing they did, as you know, Jakki, is they changed the way people viewed the dying and the sick, and the way we look at suffering. And this is where they've made a lot of real solid ground, because they have reshaped the way Canadians feel about suffering.
Okay, so you're talking about the euthanasia lobby today, those that agree with it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we haven't been able to fight that very well, because there's this attitude that, well, we put down dogs, don't we? So they've had, since Robert Latimer, and remember the judge ruled that Robert Latimer committed compassionate homicide. And so for the last 20 years or so, they have changed, they've redefined what love is, what mercy is, what compassion is, where once we saw that as restorative, and so we provided the resources needed. We built Participation House and all our social safety net, because they've been able to change that point of view from restorative to, oh, they don't want, who wants to live like that? So where once we really wanted to make the people who couldn't make it on their own, we wanted to give them a hand up. Now we've sort of thrown up our hands and said, you know what, it costs too much to keep them, let's get rid of them.
Okay, so basically you're saying that we used to give them reasons to live, and now we're giving them reasons to die.
Right, and if you keep telling somebody long enough, you know what, you're a burden. You know what, there are decisions that we have to make. And, you know, some have to die that others might live. If that's the only thing you hear, when the people who are promoting death are exalted in the media, and they have been for years, and the people who want to live have no voice, except for little clips like this, you know, life is worth living. As someone who is in pain continually and has had a very difficult life, in spite of it, I have done the best that I could. I've contributed to society in my small way. I've made a difference. And that's the essence of what's not being said anymore. It's like, just jump, Steve.
Okay, right. Yeah, and you're referring to what, when I'm in the classrooms and we're talking about this, one of the ways I try and explain to the young people the difference we have in our attitude for suicide prevention for able-bodied people that are having mental or emotional or psychological problems. You know, we have a national suicide prevention set up, right? But now, when we're focusing more on those who have either disabilities or disabilities from chronic or terminal illnesses or certain sort of suffering, we don't reach out the same way. We sort of more or less look and say, well, yes, if we had to live like you, we'd probably want to die too. So jump, right? There's that push. We'll help you go, which is very strange, actually, for Canadians, because when I first came here, it's such a. I've always thought it was a loving. People were loving and compassionate and kind, and
well, that's
so
where.
yeah. If I just may
Sorry.
finish, because I think we need to take this back. You raised Tracy Lynn Latimer, and I'm not sure if everybody out there, especially the young ones, might know that. But if you Google Tracy Lynn Latimer, you will see that Tracy was a young girl, and she had cerebral palsy also, but she was within the 10% that really were quite severely disabled. But she lived a happy, beautiful little life. Her father decided her life wasn't her worth living it, or him worth tolerating it. And he took her life. And I used to say at that particular point, we were told by his own confession that he had thought about how he was going to kill her for a week, and whether he would give her Valium and shoot her, give her Valium and set fire to her, or give her Valium and put the exhaust in his truck, which is actually what he did in the end. And I still ask that question, if Tracy had been an able-bodied child, what would we have done? We would really have called him what he was, a murderer. And yet many Canadians thought he was a hero for putting her out of his misery. Not
Well,
her
I
misery.
think really, Jackie, this is what this debate really is about. Is about putting people without disability out of their own misery.
Yes, I agree.
It's been my observation that most people are uncomfortable with disabilities, and the stronger the disability, the more uncomfortable they become. In other words, if the person drools or spasmodically moves, fear is it really makes a difference on how you view me. And so I think really, to be bluntly honest, it's if we don't see them, then we're not reminded that we might end up like that one day. So I think it's the perfectionist attitude, the models and all that they try to do on television. Women have suffered terrible because they've tried to live up to to the perfect woman. And I think now society has this drive for perfect health, and anything short of it needs to be dealt with.
Okay, I'm going to jump straight away and come up with something else here now. When we talk about this perfect health, now we're seeing in our system already that if you're 70 and older, there are things they're not going to provide for you in the medical health field. If you smoke, they're more reticent to do certain things with you. Do you see that as a vulnerability? Like, one of my threads all these years, no matter where it is, where euthanasia is, anywhere across the world, it has always helped with the health budget, because it's so much easier, rather than give you a $20,000 or $25,000 treatment, to give you $300 worth of drugs and say, here, this is your choice, this is, down to you, when we know it isn't, to take that. So what do you say about, do you see anything
Well, I think this
like
is
that
where
being a money
doctors,
spinner for
I think this is where doctors are going to have autonomy, where what you're talking about, $25,000 treatment or $300 treatment. And I believe that the doctor is going to...
$300 kill yourself. Suicide,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And so I think that the doctor or the panel or whoever, somebody is going to decide on a case-by-case basis, or even in the hospitals, because the boards get together all the time anyway. And so I believe that what will happen is the board will sit down and say, this one lives and this one dies. And we've seen cases where the hospital says, this is what we've decided, and there's no, the parent or the guardian has no right. This person's treatment is too expensive, they are a certain age, or they have, like you said, they've smoked, or they've damaged their body in some way, and instead of saying that's part of life, and saying, well, these were legal things that they did, they want to blame you for whatever reason, and so that they can say, well, because you did this and because you did that, we're going to deny you access. And that is what's going to happen in the end.
Okay, now I want to get to your letter. You sent a letter to the Prime Minister, but just before I do that, this is really being sold to Canadians. That it will ultimately be everything about their own choice, their own decisions. Now, I think we both know that's not necessarily the truth, because if you can go to the doctor and you say, I want that, it's the doctor that's going to say, you can't have that. So I think quality of life decisions are already being made by physicians. So how are we being fooled into
well, the fact that we're actually saying, that we're having to fight for conscience rights, should give you a hint that where we're going is, sure, maybe for a little bit of time we'll have certain doctors, certain pharmacists, certain nurses will be able to say no, but there will definitely come a day when, because you receive provincial, federal, municipal money, you must obey the law of the land. Now, the guy at St. Joe's put it this way. The CEO of St. Joe's at Hamilton, he said there was a man that was asked to do something that his conscience wouldn't allow him to do by his boss. And the man turned to him and said, I just work for you. You don't own me. And this is what this debate is. Who owns my life anyway? Me or the state? And ultimately it's going to be the state.
Yeah, but that can be argued by the patient, right? Who owns my life anyway? I own it.
Not necessarily.
Well,
what if I'm mentally challenged?
Well,
what if I have Alzheimer's?
So it'll be argued by somebody else.
That's correct.
And we've seen that in Holland and in Belgium, where folks with mental problems have actually been supposedly given permission to have themselves killed.
And whatever law you put up, Jackie, as you know, we've talked about this, you're in a hospital room somewhere.
For sure.
And there's nobody there from the Supreme Court trying to make sure that the law is being followed. And let me put it to you this way. I once asked a doctor, I said, aren't you worried about malpractice, the growing malpractice issues within Canada, doctors being sued?
Sure.
And he said to me, there are 8 people in the room, Stephen, in an OR room. He said, the burden is on you to prove who made the mistake. And I'm telling you, the burden will be on you to prove that the doctor gave a lethal injection. And not one of those people will turn on the other.
And you are going to be dead anyway. So
right. No, but I'm saying, even if my family tried to find out whether I was euthanized, they'll all, because, one washes the other, one back.
Sure.
So you won't know, once this starts, there won't be statistics, because they're not going to record every euthanasia death, because what they're going to say is, he died from cerebral palsy. Yeah. He died from Alzheimer's. So that gives them carte blanche. And that's the lie that people have to understand. Statistics can be manipulated, and they will be manipulated. The goal is to get rid of the weak. And the real reason is because it's cheaper to kill you than to keep you. Because the rich have a lot of money and they want more.
Okay, so the discussion around this now, we've talked about, sorry to wave my pencil, but you know
That's
me,
all right.
we do it all the time. We've talked about the language around this in the past. So it is being discussed as medically assisted death or medical aid in dying. And yet we know, not only from the recommendations that have come out, but also from the Supreme Court in Carter itself, that it actually mentions nothing about terminal illness. It doesn't mention dying. This is in fact about suicide, killing yourself, and if you're not able to, having somebody help you kill yourself. It is not limited to the dying person within 2 days of their death or anything like that. We've got just a situation that you're in, the condition that you are in or somebody else is in, that you find intolerable, the suffering intolerable. And I don't believe that that actually is a question that was asked Canadians. We've never been asked, do you believe anybody at any point in time, in any age, at the moment the court is saying 18, we know that already there's a discussion to have a committee set up whereby there will be what I would love to call an oxymoron, a mature minor.
No, they call them informed minors.
Well,
let's get the informed minors.
Okay.
Now, what is an informed minor?
Well, exactly. There's still a minor. We wouldn't let an informed minor drive a car. So
drink,
or whatever.
Break the law in any other way.
Sure. So the language that's being used is, I think, also being used to fool people. One of the things we've talked about is the fact that when they called it MAD, which I an acronym, MAD, it was the choice between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now we've got MAID, which is more in my head, you're serving us up on a platter. Well, who's going to be on the platter? Which vulnerable people will be there first? But let's go back to your letter. You wrote to the Prime Minister in November. Now, I would ask you, have you had a response from this yet?
No, I have not.
Must have been busy. Okay.
Well, when you're all for it, and you're going to bring in the most hideous legislation since the legalization of abortion, which his father brought in 1969, and we know how many children have died since 1969. And by the way, that was supposed to be by choice, by the way, and now we have the son picking on just about anybody. But again, we have the lie of, but it's about personal choice, my right to live or die. And yet, does the baby have a choice? The answer is absolutely not. The person that's going to be euthanized eventually doesn't have a choice.
Okay, you talk about in your letter to our Prime Minister that you have a sense of abandonment and grief and disappointment.
Well, you see...
sorry, just, where was the other piece? I just wanted to say, yeah, you've lost confidence in institutions to protect you.
Well, when you flip law upside down, these were the safeguards, these were the cords which protected the vulnerable from
law which held that your life is invulnerable.
That's right. But I was protected under law that said that even though Stephen was different, even though Stephen costs us money, he has the right to exist. And so these people who promote assisted suicide and euthanasia, they had no way in. They had no wedge through words or anything else, because I had certain inalienable rights and they were protected under Canadian law. So now I feel like those underpinnings, if you will, have been removed, and I am in free fall. And if I want to go to the Supreme Court, well, they're on side. If I want to go to most mainstream media, they're on side. So the vulnerable have less of a voice now, and we're
because
going.
you have an option. Kill yourself.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to be encouraged all the way along. If you don't like it, Steve,
Yeah.
you know what your option is.
Yeah.
And so, I knew that the wolves weren't going to get me. But now, because I cost money, because some people view my life as my quality of life, I hate that definition, but some doctor someday is going to say, well, Stephen's such and such an age, and you know, his quality of life isn't getting better, you know, after all, his scoliosis is getting worse, and you know, he now walks with a cane where he didn't before, you know, and so I'm not sure that my right to exist is going to be fought for by the people that should. The people in the doctor's office, the pharmacist, because or even a nurse, where when you had the Hippocratic Oath, and as you know, we've talked about this, the reason they brought in the Hippocratic Oath, ladies and gentlemen, was to protect the patients from euthanasia and assisted suicide. That is why they brought it in. But nobody has told the public that. And that protected the patient, where now we're not so much interested in protecting the patient. We're more interested in protecting the system that says now we can kill. So this is about making sure that they have autonomy to kill above my autonomy to live. Don't kid yourself.
Okay. I'm going to say now, you are obviously, because of the disability that you live with and the conditions that you live with, you are I think we agree with this, you are the first ones that will be judged this way. Seriously, I think you are. But I think it's important for those that are watching this and listening to you that all of our lives have been devalued, because we live in a country who doesn't even want its military to kill people in defense of our country. We live in a country that believes that to kill even those who are guilty of horrendous crimes is a wrong thing to do.
Right.
And yet suddenly, somehow, we're okay with killing the innocent who are vulnerable. And in order to do that, we've actually devalued every single one of our lives to do that, because it means at a certain point in my life, or everybody, your life out there, that you may feel that you need the help of the medical system or whatever to live. And now suddenly we're in a situation where, if I go back 12 years to when I was really sick and couldn't walk, that maybe today the doctor would say to me, well, Jakki, do you really think it's worthwhile going on? And how is that's going to make me feel worthless. And so this is, well, I absolutely agree with you. You are on the front lines of the first victims. I totally agree. But we're all actually going to be there. If we sit back and let them say that them being this government, that government has the authority to sanction the killing of innocent human life, which it doesn't have in human terms or any other terms. We know that. So what can we do? We've talked about, the vulnerable, we've talked about how we've got here. We're now looking at doctors being bullied into becoming assassins, medical assassins. When you've got one of the stats from the CMA on their members was that 77% of the doctors would never be involved. Excuse me, I think I've got that number wrong. 84% of the doctors that are members of the CMA in 2013 said they would not be involved in this. Across the world, in 74 countries, 69% of doctors said they would not be involved in this. In my own country, England, 77 doctors. So the only way they will be involved is if they are bullied into it and they give in, like we are being bullied into it as citizens of Canada, to accept this awful error. So how, where do you see it going? What should we do right now, right this minute, with the situation the way it is? We're supposedly awaiting some, amazing legislation that is allowing medical killing, and there are those, even on our side, that would say, well, because it's almost a statement of fact we're going to get it, we need to limit the harm. How do you limit the harm of killing? How do you do that?
Well, I think that's been the victory, if you will, of this whole debate, is they knew once they started talking safeguards, they had already won. And those who are supposedly on our side, we talk about this issue amongst ourselves all the time. But it's only people like you and I, Jackie, that have the conviction to say to the public, no. Others say, well, if we can just get conscience rights. How long will you have conscience rights, Jackie? We know, because you just said it a minute ago about how we're being bullied. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very disappointed with people who, they're like bobbleheads. They talk the talk. Oh, life is precious, life is sacred. But when they have to come out in a public survey or in some way to identify that they are pro-life or think that this is a horrendous thing to do, they shriek back. And I'm very disappointed with people who know where this is going. They know mm-hmm. that thousands of people every year are going to die.
They're going to be killed.
Yeah, and the adage that I always used, and this is where the parallels of yesterday and today come in. During the Second World War, there was a church, and beside that church was a railway. And so every day on the way to one of the concentration camps, the train would come by and the people in that church would hear the cries for help. Now, instead of addressing the issues, which is what we're actually crying out for help, but instead of addressing the issues, they turned up the music so they could not hear the screams of the dying. And all of those who believe in safeguards are doing the same thing. Okay, you're just putting a Band-Aid on an open wound.
Okay. So we've talked about this. I think we're going to sort of wrap it up in a few minutes now. But the fact that people talk about a slippery slope, and in Canada we've just gone off the precipice. I know that Margaret Somerville, said this is such a seismic shift in our values to go from never killing anyone, never sanctioning the killing of anyone, born human being at least, even the guilty, to having this open, this attitude that, if I am tired of my life, because that's in Holland, that's where it is now. You can just be tired of your life,
yeah.
And you can have assisted suicide. So we know that with the recommendations that we've just seen, or we have seen from the Provincial and Territorial Bunch Committee, and also now from our Special Joint Committee, that we have gone out of the gate at 1,000 kilometers an hour. We've just gone out. So we are going to be ending up, if nothing happens to change it, with the worst law in the world, right? The most open, the most liberal, the most permissive law in the world, which will even include minors and probably, I would imagine, like the Groningen Project, little ones that are born with disabilities into this world. So that thin end of the wedge that we talked at right at the very beginning, that change in attitude to those who are non-rehabilitable or have irremediable illnesses, if you like, is fueling all of this. And even locally, and we're here in Guelph, for those that want to know, we've had discussion with our local hospice. And I feel sorry, you know, across the country for those in hospice, because we all admire and love and with what they do. But we've been told that the board will abide by the law, should the law pass, and enable assisting people to kill themselves within that hospice setting or palliative setting. Also, our local hospital, just last week, we were told by a doctor, and he was talking about something else, but he said, you know, if the law comes down and it passes, that assisted suicide is, or they love to call it medical aid in dying to confuse us, but assisted suicide is legal, it will happen in this hospital. So, you know, this is across the country, so we are being, you know, not only bullied into being quiet about what's happening, but our wonderful, wonderful institutions are going to be bullied into becoming killing centres, our doctors bullied into being medical assassins. You know, what do we do? What can we do at this late juncture, in your estimation?
Well, if we
what could we do?
if we don't learn to love the other, if we don't learn to love this, not focus on the suffering, but the person who is suffering the right way, as in a restorative way. If we don't love enough to move our feet and say no, like I have to honestly ask you, and to the public, and I'm going to turn to the camera now. Do you love me? Do you love me?
Despite yourself, I do.
And that's what this debate is about. Is because I'm different, because I walk different, because of all different issues, because I cost you money, because I have to be looked after. If you can watch this video and not answer that question with, yes, Stephen, yes, Mary, yes, Ruth, yes, Betty, yes, John, I love you enough to make a difference. I'm so tired of people who know all about this issue and have done nothing. Well, this is the difference between life and death now. And what you do with this video after you watch it, if you don't act, then you know what? Your silence, you're just as guilty as the person who's going to euthanize me by your silence. So I'm putting you on notice now. You have a choice to make. Because if you don't save my life, one day it'll be your life. And that's what you have to understand. You have to make a choice to let the state kill me and then kill you if this isn't stopped.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And also to remember that by opposing assisted suicide, by opposing the killing, you're not condemning people to, you know, lives of continual pain and continual suffering. We know that we need more doctors trained in pain management. We all know that. Well, let's go there. Let's do that. Let's not make people think that they're a burden on us. You know, if they are losing some of their autonomy, let's help them have as much as they can. With the pain piece in Oregon, I was just looking at my statistics here. From the latest yearly report, only 23.7% of people gave pain as a reason why they're considering assisted suicide. Mostly it's sort of this loss of autonomy. I can't do what I used to do. Or, you know, I can't take part in activities like I used to do. Well, that we can include people. We just need to know, right? Families need to make folks who are part of their loving family not feel that they're a burden, not feel that they're losing that autonomy. I mean, I sat with both of my parents when they died, and my mum a lot longer, having to care for her. And the roles switched. You know, I was mother to my mum when she was dying. But we laughed and cried and prayed, because I'm a Christian, you know, through all of that. And the times, my mum was such an independent person, but she made fun of the change that was going on. And I know everybody can't do that. But I think she had the grace to do that because we all just saw her the way she always was. And I think that to me is what we have to do. We just see people how they are. And we defend their life no matter what sorry state they're in. Excuse me, but really. And when somebody's crying out for suicide, whether you have an able body or whether you don't, you are crying out for somebody to make sense of your life and what's happening to you at that moment.
But you don't abandon them. You don't abandon them. And this is what this debate is going to do. It's going to abandon the dying. It's going to abandon the sick.
Yeah.
It's going to abandon people with cognitive disabilities, those with mental disabilities. It's going to abandon whole groups of society because we have forgotten that love protects the weak. I'm going to tell you a story that I usually tell when I speak. And that is, I saw in the Hamilton Spectator one day a lady, she had 2 children, and they went to Algonquin Park, I believe it was, and for some reason they came upon a bear. And that bear attacked those 2 children, and they died. But because that mother loved beyond her own need, she defended those children at the cost of her own life. Because love protects the weak. At all costs, Jackie. That's why you do what you do. That's why I do what I do. Because I truly love my brothers and my sisters. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your religious background is. I don't care if you're part of the gay community. I don't care if you're a transvestite. I truly love you, and I want you to have a wonderful life protected by Canadian law with the proper sense of love, mercy, and compassion.
Thanks, Steve. So in closing, I guess our message to our 2 messages really. One to the Prime Minister, that with respect, sir, you have no authority to sanction the killing of innocent human life. The duty of government is to protect its people even when we don't value our own lives, right? You have to protect us. Secondly, to everybody out there, we're calling on a day on March the 31st where we're just asking you to let your MP or your MPP know, because both federal and provincial governments are going to be involved in this. That killing is not the Canadian value. It's not what we do. That if there is help to be sought, we'll find it. If there are people that need us to stand beside them, we stand beside them. So any more information, please give us a call at 519-824-7797. If you want to talk to Stephen, I'd be very happy to. I know you're going to tell me now on camera that anybody can call you that wants to, right?
Yeah. If they go through you, they're more than welcome to.
Fine. If you go through me, you're more than welcome to. And once again, even on camera, we're going to say, I've told Stephen this often enough. Anybody wants to take his life has to go through me first. So there's two of us gone, right, Stephen?
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be my brother in England. I'm sure he'd
But
be on the next plane.
Yeah,
But he'd be on the next plane.
He would.
He'd only need a phone call.
Yeah. Anyway, so we hope that we know we haven't dealt with everything here today, but I hope that we've just put a different slant on it for you, and that somehow you will reach out, or you will learn more if you don't know enough. And if you are somebody that is suffering in pain or suffering in spirit, give us a call too, because your life is worth living.
And we'll try and put you in contact with people who will help you, who will just, most of this debate is because we don't learn to sit with one another.
Sure.
A lot of people want to die because they feel like nobody cares. And so if you would just visit your nursing home, if you would just take the time to visit community living or the CP Center, if you would just take the time to visit the vulnerable and see, in spite of the obstacles of life, how most of them have a wonderful life, a wonderful attitude, you will be changed. You see, that's one of the things that the broken bring to you. They bring you change. You learn how to care for others through the brokenness of disability
but you
or
also
hardship.
see courage. You also see courage,
Right.
and that's what a lot of people need. Right?
Sure.
Anyway, thank you, all of you. Thank you, Elva, for being here listening, and for Christine for this video. We wouldn't be able to do it without her, and I guess we'll see you all again.